Everybody, welcome back. It's Mob Vlog, December 14th, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we're going to be talking about the young Turks, the guys who started the Chicago outfit. We did the first part last week, and we're going to pick up where we left off this week. So welcome back, guys. It's Mob Vlog. What is going on, Red Wemette? How are you doing?
I feel like I'm getting closer to Christmas.
That's because we are getting closer to Christmas. So, Red, I want to say hello to a few people here that are in there. Man, you guys are packed in here already. This is crazy. Jim Yeager,
Yes.
Julie M. You got Don Ciccio. He's in the room. Don Ciccio Di Porzalo. The crowd's here. Keith Helton. How are you today? Bobby Bag of Donuts. Dave Meliska. And it's good to see all of you. Van Pasterman. Anthony DiMartini. Cicero is in the house today. And Frank Ferraro. Good to see you. Everybody's here today. So we're going to just pick up where we left off last week. And there's a link in the description down below if you guys wanted to follow along with this. Ron Frierson from Gary, Indiana. Damn, Gary, Indiana.
Gary, Indiana.
People still live in Gary, Indiana?
I guess.
When I would live there, man. I went to a party once in Gary, Indiana. My friend took me to this party, and that
Sounds
was
like
some
a
party.
good friend.
Oh yeah. Unbelievable. Okay, so last week we talked about Al Capone. Al Capone coming to Chicago, and his relationship with these Torrio, and then these up and comers like Tony Accardo, which used to carry bat around with him and beat people upside the head with it. Got the name Joe Batters, and then we were getting into Paul Ricca, and that's where we were at when we finished. So, Felice De Lucia was born in 1897 in Naples, Italy, making him 34 years old when Al Capone was convicted of tax evasion. In Italy, Felice committed his first murder at age 18 when his sister Amelia was disgraced by the family of a boy she was dating. In a fit of rage, Felice murdered the suitor, Emilio Pirello. After serving 2 years, Felice tracked down and murdered the witness who had fingered him. On the run, De Lucia told the identity of fellow Neapolitan Paul Maglio and made his way to New York, and from New York to Chicago in the gangster pipeline. In the Windy City, De Lucia assumed the name Paul Ricca and took work as a waiter, a job that would earn him Paul the Waiter Ricca. So he was a waiter.
Those are facts. Those are real facts.
Okay. So this Paul Ricca, 18 years old when he commits his first murder.
Yeah.
Okay. Ricca worked to establish a far different persona from the violent one he had earned in Italy. In Chicago, his reputation was that of a soft-spoken, well-mannered businessman. In his late 20s, Ricca took to work as a manager of Little Italy's World Playhouse, a side enterprise of the Torrio Capone Combine. His superior intellect was not unnoticed by the big fellow, and Ricca's star rose quickly. When Ricca married in 1927, his new best friend Al Capone stood up for him as best man. See, these guys were tight. So soon, Capone appointed young Paul as his personal emissary in dealings with syndicates from other cities. When Johnny Torrio established the commission with Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky in New York, Ricca was honored with a critical role of liaison to the gang from the Big Apple. The coming decades would see yearly powwows convened in mob-favored restaurants, with the gang's intent on maintaining and coordinating the alliance. At such times, Paul played either the host in Chicago or traveling emissary to New York.
Unlike the movie Mobsters, where he shows up and Christian is there and he says, "You want it, Al? You can have it." Al wasn't there.
The infamous 1929 Atlantic City mob confab, New York mob boss Meyer Lansky advised a young Paul Ricca on how to get rich in the rackets. "Play the waiting game," said Lansky. "Keep your name out of the newspapers and build your own organization." Ricca and his outfit colleagues took that to heart. With Nitti as the interim frontman, it was only a matter of time before the real brain trust took over, as Paul patiently waited at his turn at the helm. His nickname, the Waiter, became double entendre. There you go. So both are correct. Because I remember Frank Cullotta, by the way, today,
saying he was the waiter because he didn't wait on nothing.
No. He waited for you. Now, did he mean he waited for you to die so that he could become boss? That possibly. So, yeah, but a double entendre in that. Simultaneous with the enlistment of Joe and Paul in the mid-20s, Capone installed another key member of his team. Capone met the young man when the new recruit was 27 years old. The newest syndicate soldier combined great style and charm with one of the fiercest intellects in the annals of organized crime. His closest friends knew him as Curly. Now, who the hell is Curly? Curly. He was a man of many aliases. John Brunswick, G. Logan, Mr. Lincoln, Dave Ostrand, Cy Pope, and John Hall are among more than 24 listed by the FBI. The press referred to him as the Camel or the Hump, but it was the nicknames bestowed on him by people who actually knew him that spoke volumes, like Mr. Einstein, the brainy hood, Mr. Moneybags. If he had chosen the straight life, Llewellyn Morris Humphreys, his name was Llewellyn Morris Humphreys, could have been an advisor to the president or CEO of a Fortune 500 firm. A master of syllogism, Humphreys' gift for didactic reasoning left everyone in awe. Tall and nattily attired, he moved as easily among Hollywood studio heads and nationally known politicians as he did among the gang that frequented the Four Deuces. This guy's versatile, this Camel.
Adam?
Murry the Hump.
Can you take a second here? Because Joe Cullotta says he's got a story about him.
I got a story about Paul Ricca that Dino told you. Really? I'd love to hear it. I'd love to, I'm sure everybody else would love to hear it too. Yeah. Did he come into the barber shop? That'd be cool. All right. As soon as Joe calls, I'll put him on. Although he had no compunction about meting out the ultimate punishment. Here we go. We'll get back to that in a second. Okay. Hey, Joe, how's it going today?
Okay. I got a funny story. He never came in the barbershop. Paul Ricca never came by Igor's. But I got a funny story. Every Tuesday, Paul, Jack, a bunch of them used to meet at Armand's restaurant before it opened. They would sit in the back room And Mike would cook for them. Actually, Joe Lombardo's father was a cook there. They called him Bob Mike. But anyhow, he cooked there. So these guys were all sitting there at the table, shooting the bullshit or whatever. And our friend Dino, you had Dino on your tour one time, or he talked to you one time.
Yes.
Anyhow, Dino walked in the back when they were all sitting there, and he made a joke to Paul, but Paul didn't think was funny. And Mike Armand had a sailfish on the wall. This is a true story. You could ask Dino. He had a sailfish on the wall there, mounted on the wall. And Dino made a funny comment to Paul, and Paul goes, "Dino, you see that fish on the wall?" And Dino goes, "Yeah." He goes, "It never gets there if it don't open its mouth." And Dino said, "Joe, I turned fucking white." He goes, because the way he said it to me with a stern face, he says, and I just kept walking, and I never teased it with him again. And Paul liked Dino, because Dino had that kind of personality. But that's a story about Dino and Paul.
Wow.
Yeah. The fish never gets on the wall if you don't open his mouth.
It doesn't get caught if it keeps its mouth shut.
That's right.
Yeah.
But, whatever. But thanks, everybody, for prescribing. It's my brother's birthday today. Thanks, everybody.
He'd have been 83.
84.
84?
84 today he would be. Yeah, he was born in 1938.
That's right. So, that's right. You'd have been, yeah.
84 years old. Yeah. Wow. But anyhow, it reminds me of Christmas time by Igor's. He used to have, Igor was a good guy. And the shoplifters used to come there, and the burglars. They'd come in there, and he had a mesh screen on covering his windows, and they would come in there, they'd shoplift, and they'd bring in leather jackets and stuff. There were guys that could take 2 and 3 jackets at a time out of a store, and they'd come in there and they'd hang them up and they'd sell them in there around the holidays and that. So that was at Igor's shop. So he had them in there, and they happened to be auditing Igor at the time, the IRS.
Uh-huh.
And Igor's like, "Oh man," he says, "we got the G in here auditing me." And he had the showcase with all stolen ties and cufflinks and all sorts of stuff in there. The guy, IRS, 2 IRS agents were there with their little calculators, adding up how many customers came in and all of that baloney. And so the guy's, "Oh, these are nice ties." And Igor's like, "You want one?" And the guy's like, No. And in a little while, they're there for 3 days. So one day Igor takes out a tie and he puts it around the guy, because the guy liked the tie. His name was Dan, the agent. And Igor takes the tie out of the showcase and he puts it around the guy's neck and he ties it on the guy. And the guy, "Yeah, I like this tie." And Igor's, "No, I got you. Like he owned the IRS. And the guy couldn't get the tie off. But it was a funny story, but made me think about it because it's Christmas time, and Igor used to sell all hot stuff in there around the holidays. Anyhow, that's my story about Paul and Igor Shafter today, but sorry to interrupt you guys.
No, never. Joe,
you did, Joe. Thank you.
That's awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Remember the fish story, everybody.
Yeah. It doesn't get caught if it keeps its mouth shut.
That's right. Or get in trouble.
I love it.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Yep. That's awesome. Love it when Joe calls in with a story.
And appropriate.
Yes. Whatever seems to be the topic, it puts something there in his head, a story. And so, all right, let's get back.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for supporting the channel, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate that super sticker. Okay. So, although he had no compunction about meeting the ultimate punishment to an enemy, he did it rarely, and only as last resort. To the rest of his acquaintances, Humphreys was a charming, soft-spoken, rakish dandy. He was often described as the nicest member of the outfit. The only known Welsh gangster, Humphreys was so courteous and trustworthy that when told of his passing, his FBI case officer reportedly had to stifle a tear. arguably the most fascinating hoodlum who ever lived. He was so obsessive about his low profile that he remains for many the unknown gangster. That's pretty interesting. Humphreys was born in Chicago on or about April 20th, 1899, to Welsh immigrants. Since no birth certificate has ever surfaced, the exact date remains in question. As best can be determined, Humphreys had one brother and three sisters, he being the third born. As a youngster, his mane of dark, curly hair earned him the nickname by which um, his close friends would know him from then on. Curly.
As the Camel.
It makes no curly because of his curly hair.
Oh, gotcha.
Precious is known. Oh, Precious little is known of his early years, as he always demurred at discussing them. Even in congressional testimony decades later, Curly Humphreys refused to open up about his formative period. What little has emerged suggests that as a boy, Curly sold newspapers, but soon gravitated to petty theft and street gang fights. As a 13-year-old, he came under the influence, perhaps by court order, of a judge named Jack Murry, who saw in Curly a rare brilliance. According to various accounts, Murray attempted to school the bright young rebel in the way of the political world in an attempt that would backfire. As a young, it would backfire as young Curly heard only what he wanted. There was a double standard for the great turn of the century robber barons and the rest of the world. Curly appears to have taken this as a clarion call to join the life of the immoral criminal in a world without reason. In honor of the intentioned judge and to thank him for the political education, Curly changed his name to Murray Humphreys. He also became a talented jewel thief. Little is known of Curly's life over the next few years. FBI records indicate that as a 16-year-old, he was nabbed for petty larceny, for which he served 60 days in the House of Corrections. Humphreys, who is by this tender age had mastered use of the persuasion and payoff, had the charge reduced from felony burglary, which would have mandated a much longer prison term. George Murray, a journalist and acquaintance of Humphreys, recalled that Humphreys first obtained a private meeting with the prosecutor. The precocious young man was in a rare form as he argued, "You tried to get me indicted for burglary, and I will weep in front of the grand jury. They probably won't indict me because I'm only 16. But if you get me to court, the do-gooders will say that because of my extreme youth, I ought not be sent to prison. However, if you reduce the charge to petty larceny, I will plead guilty. I will get a light sentence. You will get a conviction that looks good on your record. Everybody will be happy. What's more, you will receive a suitable gift before the case goes to court." A suitable
sharp
gift.
Kid, very sharp kid. He learned young,
right? No kidding.
He really flew underneath the radar.
The prosecutor was persuaded, and the next day, an expensive diamond-studded wristwatch was placed anonymously on his desk, and Curly's modus operandi was now carved in stone. As the big guy would later say, anybody can use a gun. The hump uses his head. He can shoot if he has to, but he likes to negotiate with cash when he can. I like that in a man. Curly's style became so famous that to this day, hoods and non-hoods alike happily quote aphorisms that are attributed to the disarming Welshman. Among the most quoted, these are his quotes: "Love thy crooked neighbor as you love thy crooked self." That's inscribed on a plaque that hung above his fireplace. Here's another one: "Go out of your way to make a friend instead of an enemy." Good advice. No good citizen will ever testify to anything if he is absolutely convinced that to do so will result in his quick and certain death. Good advice. "The difference between guilt and innocence in any court is who gets to the judge first with the most."
That's Chicago style.
If you ever have to cock a gun in a man's face, kill him. If you walk away without killing him after doing that, he'll kill you the next day. And finally, you ready for this one? Vote early and vote often. I didn't know that was Camel that came up with that one, huh? Vote early, vote often. I remember hearing that all over Chicago as a kid. Oh, yeah. Years later, Curly would have another wall plaque with an inscription many believe represents his finest intellectual achievement. In 1951, acting on Curly Humphreys' advice, outfit bosses befuddled a Senate panel with a plea legislatures had never heard before. Citing the Fifth Amendment privilege, they refused to answer the investigators' questions. Although the refusal had been voiced in criminal court, Congress had not previously experienced this tactic, and believing the exemption could not be enforced in their venue, they cited the bosses for contempt. Much to their consternation, the committee was informed by the courts that Curly's precedent-setting ploy was in fact legal. Soon, a plaque was seen hanging in Curly's Oklahoma house. Quote, "I refuse to answer on the grounds it might incriminate me." Wow. In 1921, while on the lam for a jewel heist, Curly fled to his brother's home in Little Axe, Oklahoma. The slick-talking Humphreys took work as a door-to-door Victrola. What's that? A Victrola salesman? What are Victrola?
That was the first. You crank it up. It was the first records.
So
it was 78 RPMs. You crank it up and it had a big cone on it.
Yeah, I remember. I've seen pictures.
I used to have one.
On one of his rounds, and charmed a beautiful half Cherokee college student named Mary Clementine Brendel. Clemmy, as she was known, would become an indispensable component in the financial workings of the outfit. Really? Said to have possessed total recall, Clemmy would eventually commit to memory the names of 100 Union presidents, unions Curly would be controlling. After a brief courtship, the couple married and returned to Chicago, where the heat had cooled on the new bridegroom. Now, in his early 20s, Curly found work as a short-order cook at the Messenger's restaurant on Halsted Street. There he met another brilliant and perhaps the only college-educated gangster, Fred Evans. Evans had studied accounting, engineering, and architecture, earning his degree at age 19. At the time he met Humphreys, Evans was earning his walk-around money buying and selling jewelry and distressed merchandise that he'd acquired at government auctions, taking advantage of a pre-Black Tuesday final depression that prompted insurance companies to hold auctions in an attempt to recoup their losses. Inevitably, these two prodigies were drawn to each other like magnets. Curly thought that if the two joined forces, they could fence pilfered merchandise, which included repainted stolen cars acquired by Curly's gang, alongside Evans' goods at the warehouse Evans rented. As with everyone else who met Curly, Evans was charmed, and a partnership was born. Not surprisingly, their enterprise quickly escalated into the big money operations of bootlegging. However, with no breweries of their own, the young men took the direct approach. They hijacked the other bootleggers' trucks. Well, why not? Humphreys proved not only to be a talented booze thief, but an effective kidnapper as well. Often bootleggers were kidnapped until their partners paid up either booze or money. Among the gang's kidnappings were a nuisance that came with the territory. All was going along swimmingly until Curly made the first and possibly last stupid mistake of his life. He hijacked a shipment owned by Al Capone.
Ow.
Oops. Oops, that's not good. After fleeing terror from the gun-toting Humphreys, Capone's driver scurried back to the Four Deuces and reported what had happened. In short order, Capone had the young upstart hauled before his tribunal of one. Instead of regulating the curly-headed thief to the heap of corpses of previous transgressors, however, Capone was inveigled by the defendant, just as he had before the juvenile division prosecutor. Curly, somehow, details are unknown, talked himself out of being sanctioned. And before he was through, he was not only acquitted, he was offered a job. This guy's a smooth talking son of a bitch, huh? I mean, seriously. Curly could never forget Capone's act of forgiveness and became one of his most loyal charges. Later, Curly would name his pet dog Snorky in homage to Capone. No kidding.
I don't know if that's a compliment. I named my dog after you.
Yeah. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. After a brief stint as a beer truck driver for the syndicate, Humphreys was given a role more suitable to his intellect, the protection rackets. Curly quickly became adept at the way of extortion and graft. Curly's preference for payoffs resulted in his masterminding of the 1931 Capone jury pool bribery. Through his contacts in the judicial system, he obtained the list of jurors who, had they not been switched at the last minute, were totally corrupted and poised to acquit Capone. When Capone eventually went to jail, Curly, Joe, and Paul paid regular visits to the man who had brought them all together. As Capone once said, nobody hustles like the hump. Nobody hustles.
This must have been in Atlanta when he was in Atlanta.
I don't know.
Let's see. Capone went to Atlanta and then they sent him to Alcatraz.
Okay. So the truism rendered Curly's role in the outfit of a no-brainer. He assumed control of union takeovers, political liaisons, and protection rackets. He also would develop into a brilliant legal tactician, inventing novel defense strategies for his oft-indicted associates. Curly's future successes were predicted by the Chicago Crime Commission, which named Humphreys the new public enemy number one after Capone went away. With only a brief prison term in his future, Curly proceeded to establish himself as the outfit's most powerful chieftains for decades to come. So he was also a boss, this is Humphreys. All of these guys, because they were all came up together, they shared the responsibility of being boss. One went away, another one would take over, back and forth. All right, we ready to move into the next guy, Red? Johnny Roselli. Johnny Roselli.
Oh, no, this is gotta be a good one.
One of Curly's most important outfit associates was a largely absentee member named Johnny Roselli. Like Curly, Roselli was another affable outfitter and the country's original gangster patriot, referred to as the all-American mafioso by his biographers. Another gangster with a penchant for $1,000 silk suits, Roselli loved his high style as much as he loved his adopted country. In addition to being the outfit's traveling emissary to locales such as Hollywood and Las Vegas, Roselli partnered with the intelligence community and the Kennedy White House in their efforts to remove Cuban dictator Fidel Castro. And Roselli was likely the only one involved who refused to accept payment for his services. When he died, a high-ranking CIA executive who had worked with him wept openly, much as Curly's death moved his FBI case officer. You get to the human side of these guys, and there's a connection that happens. There's a connection. And, it happens even to cops, CIA agents. Roselli was born Filipino Sacco in Esperia, Italy, in 1905. 6 years later, his family brought him to New York. on their way to permanent residence in East Boston. As a youngster, Sacco, like his other outfit mates, was drawn to the world of street gangs, seduced by the allure of easy money. Like so many before him, young Sacco spent countless hours in the mirror practicing Malocchio, the evil eye, or the look.
Yeah.
Years later,
do you know what's odd, Adam? They all must have listened to Horace Greeley. Go west, go west. They came in New York, they came in Boston. Go west.
Yeah. You talking to me? Huh?
Yeah.
You talking to me? Standing in the mirror, practicing as I could see him. Talking to me? Or the look. Years later, Roselli counseled a friend. The secret is not to look in their eyes. You pick a spot on their forehead and you zero in. That way, you don't blink, you don't move. It intimidates the hell out of them. Judging from the career he went on to have, one can assume Sacco, like Capone, mastered the look. Dropping out of high school, Sacco took work as a driver of a horse-drawn milk wagon, the better to provide cover for his chief enterprise, narcotics trafficking, specifically morphine. Milky, as he was called, was collared twice in 1922, the result of a sting operation involving a pliant drug informant. After spending 6 months behind bars, Sacco was released and the informant was soon found murdered. Well, I wonder who did that.
Yeah.
Authorities put two and two together and decreed Filippo Sacco suspect number one. 17-year-old Sacco took his cue and fled to New York City, where he assumed the name John Stewart. After a few months distinguishing himself in the local gang scene, Sacco Stewart was quickly farmed out to the big leagues via the New York to Chicago gangster pipeline. 18-year-old Sacco became Joe Accardo's predecessor as Al Capone's driver and bodyguard. Capone and Sacco Stewart became so close that some believe them to have been cousins. One night, Al convinced Sacco to adopt a more appropriate Italian surname. Back at home, the young gangster leafed through an encyclopedia until he chanced upon an entry containing a 15th century painter who had added Last Supper frescoes to the wall of the Sistine Chapel. Cosimo Roselli. From then on, Filippo Sacco was Johnny Roselli. Even his family seemed to forget his birth name when speaking of him. During his time with Capone, Roselli, like Paul, Curly, and Joe, grew to appreciate the more importance of appearance. But unlike Capone, who was drawn to garish and often flamboyant attire, Johnny mimicked the suave, understated sophistication of Paul Ricca and his peers. In time, Roselli began acquiring his own fitting nicknames, among them Mr. Smooth. That's a cool nickname, Mr. Smooth. Just as the syndicate was about to take off under Capone's rule, unforeseen troubles cut short Roselli's stay in Chicago. Roselli may have been tough on the outside, but no amount of staring in the mirror could strengthen his inherited weak lungs. His grandfather died of tuberculosis and his father died of influenza. After a typically harsh Illinois winter, Roselli was diagnosed with incipient tuberculosis. After consultation with Capone, Johnny was dispatched to the West Coast to be the eyes and the ears of the syndicate, on the lookout for opportunities should the infant Hollywood dream factory catch hold. Capone was smart. During the Depression, the only people who appeared to flourish were gangsters and entertainers. In the year after the 1929 stock crash, Warner Brothers Pictures was valued at $160 million. You know what that would be in today's money? It'd be
billions.
Yeah, $2.5 billion. I mean, it's just crazy. Arriving in Los Angeles, Roselli quickly attached himself to the bootlegging operation of Anthony Cornero Strala, aka Tony the Hat Cornero. The stylish Cornero, a perfect match for the dapper Roselli, made his living transporting alcohol on ships from Canada and Mexico. He became so successful that he soon earned the moniker King of the Western Rum Runners. At the time, Cornero was engaged in bloody sea battles with rival rum runners that conjured up images of pirate exploits. As a trusted associate, Roselli's star and income rose with Cornero's. Tony the Hat eventually came to feel police pressure and fled to Canada, where he turned his interest to gambling. By 1930, he would relocate in Nevada, where Roselli and Humphreys were spreading Capone's money around to any member of the state legislature who would vote for the wide open gambling bill. There we go. There's the connection. I've always wondered.
That's not the money already.
No, I always wondered because I heard that Capone somehow had tried to get. Well, let's keep reading just to see what goes on here. With Cornero in absentia, Roselli gravitated to Jack Dragna's crime organization. Considered Al Capone's alter ego, Dragna, nee Anthony Rizzotti, was the City of Angels' own bootlegging, extortion, gambling kingpin. The local press knew him as the Al Capone of Los Angeles. Dragna's operation flourished largely due to his friendship with Mayor Frank Shaw, the most corrupt chief executive in Los Angeles history. The Roselli-Dragna liaison was mutually beneficial. Roselli needed a sponsor to gain acceptance. Thanks for the super sticker. Excuse me, I need water.
Agua.
Okay, good now. Thanks for the super sticker. Why would Blasey toss the gun 1 mile from his home if he killed Sam? They say because of police, but he'd be home by the time the cops knew it. Thoughts? Who are you guys talking about killed Sam Giancana? Are we talking Tony Spilotro? I'm 144 comments behind. I'm a gross of comments in the back here, so.
That's okay. He didn't make another comment about it, I don't think.
Okay.
He's talking about Sam Giancana.
Got it. Roselli needed
my guess is that it's better to get rid of it and not have it in your possession at all. He dumped it on River Road.
There you go. Could have. Roselli needed a sponsor to gain acceptance in his new home. Dragna valued not only Johnny's street smarts, but his ties to the powerful Chicago syndicate, which Dragna hoped would amplify his own purchase in the national crime hierarchy. In a police raid on the office of Dragna's lieutenant, Girolamo Momo Adamo. Girolamo? I think I got that right.
I never heard of him.
Evidence was found of the growing corruption between Dragna's gang and Roselli's outfit. Adamo's phone book contained the addresses and private unlisted numbers of Curly Humphreys and Joe Accardo. Throughout the 20s, Roselli maintained his close contact with Capone. In September of 27, Capone threw a week-long party to honor his friend boxer Jack Dempsey. Prior to Dempsey's ballyhooed title fight against champion Gene Tooney, Capone offered to fix the fight. Dempsey, however, declined. He should have accepted. Tooney won. The fight was the largest spectacle ever to hit Chicago, with over 150,000 fight fans arriving from all over the country to view the fisticuffs at Soldiers Field. Arriving by train from Los Angeles was Johnny Roselli. After the fight, he accompanied Capone's cousin, Charlie Fischetti back to his Metropole Hotel, where Capone's bacchanal was in full swing. For sheer extravagance, Capone's bash ran a close second to the proceedings at the stadium. Pianist Fats Waller played, Al Jolson sang, and top shelf alcohol and women were in great abundance, all paid for by Capone. There must have been 1,000 people in that place, Roselli later said in the Senate testimony. Polly Adler, the famous New York madam, attended the bash and later recalled in her memoir, "A house is not a home." Capone was certainly a grand host. Lucullus and those old Roman boys could have taken lessons from him. Saying that he partied harder than the Romans partied. What is that name? Lucullus? It's a guy. It's got to be a Roman name. Johnny attempted to return the hospitality when Capone journeyed to L.A. later that year. When Capone was booted from the posh Biltmore Hotel, Johnny tried to intercede with the local police, offering his home to Capone and his entourage. The authorities refused the deal and put Capone on the next train east. In due time, Roselli would gravitate to the movie business, the growing movie business. That move would have profound repercussions for the outfit. What the hell is this? Roselli made the acquaintance of a robber baron also already known to Al Capone and Curly Humphreys, Joseph P. Kennedy. Like Capone in his game, Joe Kennedy was anxious to discover what the new people's opiate would be. Now that booze was widely available, the get-rich-quick crowd desired another tightly controlled product that was in big demand. What Curly Humphreys described to his wife as the new booze. It seemed that Capone, via Roselli and Humphreys, wasn't the only bootlegger who grasped at that the new booze was the Hollywood dream factory. As he later testified, Johnny Roselli often played cards and golf with the Kennedy patriarch, who was now a prime mover in Tinseltown. All told, Kennedy's 1920s contacts with the outfit were but a prequel to a partnership arrived at 4 decades in the future. This goes all the way. This is crazy. While Mr. Smooth took full advantage of the hedonism of the movie capital, back in Chicago, his sartorial polar opposite, Greasy Thumb, was going about the mundane but essential tasks of attending to the outfit's bookkeeping.
Jake Guzik.
And Jake Guzik, I don't know if we can finish this today. Jake Guzik, we're going to try. In the outfit's ruling system, a spot on the second rung was reserved for Russian-born Jake Guzik. At 44 years old, he was 12 years Al's senior when they both went to prison for tax evasion in 31. As a child, one of 12 siblings, Guzik witnessed his parents' arrest on white slavery charges. Jake and his 5 brothers eventually became pimps themselves after starting out as errand runners for the prostitutes owned by their parents. Man, what a childhood. Jake,
yeah. And kids today think they have it rough.
Guzik was well known for his lack of personal hygiene. His former driver, George Mayer, remembers the plump pimp. Everything he ate for a week you could see on his vest. And the B.O. Guzik was not only Capone's bookkeeper at the syndicate's Four Deuces headquarters, he was his closest friend and confidant. They became so simpatico that friends began calling Guzik the little fellow, a reference to Al's the big fellow. In 1924, when a bloody Jake showed up at the Four Deuces mugged by a thug named Joe Howard, Capone went into a rage. In what was becoming an increasingly rare show of hands-on revenge, Capone tracked down Howard in a Wabash Avenue saloon, placed a pistol an inch from Howard's head, squeezed the trigger, killing him instantly. Capone's display of loyalty to someone as repellent as Guzik was not unnoticed or unappreciated by other gangsters unaccustomed to receiving such support from on high. During the Torrio Capone regime, Guzik had operated in a room leased for Torrio for A. Brown, M.D. That was the name on the door.
Well, he called himself L. Brown. That was his alias.
Okay. The office, just one block from the Deuces 4 headquarters, was illegally raided by Mayor Devers men in 1924. Although the material seized could not be entered into evidence, the raiders had neglected to obtain a search warrant. The bounty gave an insight into the Torrio Capone operations, as well as Guzik's role in it. Included in the seizures were numerous ledgers kept by Guzik, which detailed the inner workings of the regime. Among the docket headings were alcohol suppliers, Canadian and Caribbean route information, a list of commercial wholesale alcohol buyers, hotels, restaurants, etc., and illegal speakeasies. Officials, politicians, police, etc., on the payoff schedule, a list of breweries owned by the syndicate, and a list of brothels and gambling dens owned by the syndicate. The press nicknamed Guzik Greasy Thumb for reasons that are still debated. One explanation holds the financial whiz earned the name of a sloppy waiter who often let his thumb dip into the soup. The more probable version postulates that the name reflects Guzik's role as the palm greaser, who distributed countless stacks of greenbacks to corrupted cops and politicians. These payments were made from Guzik's regular table at St. Hubert's Old English Grill and Chop House, which he owned behind frontman owner Tommy Kelly. Whatever the source for the nickname, there is no evidence that anyone outside the working press referred to Guzik as Greasy Thumb. Capone shared his bounty with Guzik, who reportedly earned millions, for which the government could show no paid taxes. So trusted was Guzik by Capone that he was given the honor of chairing Al's 1926 peace conference. Guzik was convicted on tax charges 1 year before Capone and would serve 5 years before returning to the outfit as its financial and legal consigliere. This then rasped the outfit's starting lineup: Joe Accardo, Curly Humphreys, Paul Ricca, Johnny Roselli, and Jake Guzik. Their efforts were but rest by a supporting cast of hundreds. No effort was spared to insulate the leadership from the violent enforcement inflicted by the expendable ones. Among the troops who ran the gauntlet were Rocco and Charlie Fischetti. They were beer distribution. Joe Fusco, liquor. Frank Pope and Anthony Volpe, gambling. Peter Penovich Jr., floating casinos. Duke Cooney, brothels. Hyman Levine, collections. Jack McGurn, Louis Campagna, and Frank Milano, gunmen enforcers. James Belcastro and Joseph Gennaro, bomb squad. Sam Golf Bag Hunt, enforcer, found with Jack McGurn at the scene of the murder with a bag of golf clubs mixed in with a still warm machine gun. Hey, Red,
remember I told you about he carried a...
Yeah. You want to go golfing and shooting?
No.
The outfit adopted whether it's golfing, shooting. The outfit adopted whether arrived at casually or as a result of a formal decision, a strict set of personal guidelines for the new regime. The board would hold daily meetings at least 6 days of the week. They would put in 12-hour work days. The outfit leaders would dress the part, just as corporate directors of the upper world. Wives and families were to be respected at all times and kept insulated from the business of the outfit. Boozing and drug usage were not tolerated. The anti-narcotics stance was a remnant of Capone's own belief. Only two kinds of hustlers I can't stand: a pickpocket and a hophead. Al had told this to his gang. Capone's abhorrence of drugs was said to have resulted in his ordering the murders of users within the gang. Years later, Paul Ricca learned the meaning of Capone's fears firsthand when his son became a drug addict. The edict against using was mild in comparison to that against dealing. During the reign of the outfit, drug trafficking was strictly prohibited, and those who succumbed to the temptation of easy money in the narcotics trade were removed with great dispatch. One member, Chris Carty, was arrested for drug dealing. He was made an example when the bosses let him serve out his sentence, only to have him killed immediately upon his release. Imagine that. Oh, we're not going to kill you. We're going to let you sit there for 5 years, and then we're going to kill you. The gang's bylaws also had a practical rationale. One alcoholic union thug named George McLean, who was to be conscripted against his will into the outfit, recalled his meeting with Capone's successor, Frank Nitti. He told me to stop drinking and get on the wagon, McLean said. Nitti said that there was an unwritten law in the outfit. They are not allowed to drink because they might shoot their mouth off. If they shoot their mouth off, they will be found in an alley. But what thoroughly shocked McLean was that they didn't even chase broads during business hours. Lastly, the outfit continued Capone's non-discriminatory work ethic. No one was excluded from the outfit due to race, religion, or nationality. But the leadership and key decisions were still reserved for Italians only. The work of the outfit was thus transfigured from amorphous hooliganism to the business of crime, and one of its most important agendas, the control of the city's workforce. It was designated to Curly Humphreys. 1. In the mid-20s, banker investor Joe Kennedy purchased the film booking office, as well as the controlling interest in RKO Productions. When he branched into Path Films, he plundered its stock, giving insiders such as himself stock worth $80 a share, while common stockholders were reimbursed to the tune of a mere $1.50 a share. Many lost their life savings, while Kennedy walked away with a cool $5 million. The swindled stockholders tried to file suit to no avail. At the same time, Kennedy worked for Gus Currier's Boston investment firm. When Currier was away, Kennedy scrutinized his private films to gain insider information. Currier's family now say that Currier felt double-crossed by Kennedy, whom he believed to be corrupt. In 1929, Kennedy attempted a hostile takeover of the California-based Pantages theater chain. When owner Alexander Pantages balked, Joe Kennedy paid 17-year-old girl $10,000 to accuse Pantages of rape. Pantages was charged and sentenced to 50 years in prison, later reversed, and Joe Kennedy got the theater chain at a greatly undervalued price. 4 years later, when the girl wanted to admit her role in the frame-up, 4 years later, when the girl wanted to admit her role in the frame-up, she suddenly died, apparently of cyanide poisoning. On her deathbed, the 21-year-old admitted her conspiracy with Kennedy, who had promised to make her a film star. It has been well documented that Kennedy used insider information to sell short before the 29 stock market crash, making millions off the misery of his fellow citizens. The role of Ness went to Kevin Costner, who appeared to be making a career of historical misrepresentations when the 1991 film JFK. He portrayed the bullying New Orleans district attorney Jim Garrison as Jimmy Stewart reincarnated. Costner continued the theme in 2000 when he starred in and produced the dramatic recreation of the Cuban Missile Crisis 13 Days. In a role, he played presidential advisor Kenny O'Donnell, who had no known input in the crisis. Virtually all of the O'Donnell's actions and words in the film are invented. Unbelievable. we can continue this on. Curly's rack at the Union takeovers is the next part, but we're out of time today. What do you think, Red?
I think I've been putting up comments, people.
Sticker?
I've been putting up
great.
comments. We're talking.
Thanks for the super sticker, Greg. It's it's good to see all of you.
He also became a prescriber.
So we got some reading to do, which we're going to do over on Red's channel, but we're going to wrap up today. So it was a lot of fun. Thanks, guys, for all coming here today and being part of this. And I'm going to look forward to later on this evening because I had to look at the screen and read this whole time. I'm going to read your comments tonight. And I'm just skimming through them. It just shows it's all about you guys. Red Wemette should write a book about all of his dealings with Sam DiStefano. Joseph Petro. I don't know.
Much to write about.
I don't think I have enough stories to write a book about that. Anyway, hey, it's been a great time. It's been a lot of fun. Red, thanks for coming on the show today and hanging out and listening to me ramble over here and as sitting and learning about Chicago outfit history. So it's been fun. We'll see you guys next week. And we're going to be here next week. It's Christmas, right before Christmas, but we're getting there. And I can see the end of the year's almost here. This is unbelievable. Unreal. Just flew by.
No, it's believable. Let's hope for a better 2023 than a 2022.
Yeah, let's see it. Let's see it happen. All right, Red. I'll see you later. Mob vlog.